at the time that you were worried about who he would be replaced with by. You were hopeful, but you expressed concern about that. And now here we are a week later. I just read some of your fiery statement, but tell us more about how you're digesting this and what you think people should understand about this moment.
Well, Donald Trump has just installed a political hack to do his bidding. Since we talked, Jen, last week, Trump tweeted out essentially a challenge/threat to Pam Bondi saying, "You're not going after my political enemies enough." I think that was supposed to be a private message, and it went out to tens of millions of people, and he deleted it because it's the kind of thing that gets cases thrown out of court for malicious prosecution. So he put in a loyalist as interim Eastern District of Virginia U.S. attorney who has no Virginia experience, who has no prosecutorial experience, and clearly he's told her, you've got to go after my enemies. But I'll raise it up one level. If you've looked at our Attorney General Pam Bondi's statement tonight, her statement on the indictment says, you know, we've indicted for the following reasons. And then the last line is, we will follow the facts in this case. Did Pam Bondi go to law school? You follow the facts before you indict someone for a crime. You do not indict them and say, well, now we got to go look for some facts. Her statement shows this thing is a complete political hatchet job. And I think it's going to blow up in the Trump administration's face, because having practiced law in the Eastern District of Virginia for 17 years, I don't see any of the judges in this district dignifying this political persecution in any way.
Andrew, I was just talking to Andrew Weissman about how Comey, and Comey also posted on Instagram and said, like, let's go to trial. Andrew said he could have a trial within 30 days, or that's his right, as I understand it. You can correct me if I'm wrong there. What does that look like? You said the rule of law should prevail. It doesn't feel like they have much of a case here that they've outlined. What does it look like if the rule of law prevails here?
Well, it looks like there's, motions to dismiss the case for malicious prosecution. There may be some motion to dismiss it on the grounds that the U.S. attorney who is pursuing this is not lawfully in place. There's a statute that says when there's a vacancy, the DOJ can put an interim prosecutor in for 120 days. That 120 days had passed, and after 120 days, only the district court judges in a district can approve somebody to be the U.S. attorney. An article in the National Review, hardly a liberal publication earlier this week, said you can't put a new interim in to do your bidding once the 120-day period is passed. So I think the Comey attorneys have an awful lot of grounds to get this thing thrown out. Look, I've had major differences in the past with Jim Comey that I don't want to really get into. But the guy's entitled to the rule of law. He's entitled to fairness. He's entitled not to be victimized by a clearly trumped up political persecution. And so I'm going to do everything I can as the senator for this state to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't pervert our two U.S. attorneys' offices who have had a high standard for integrity for many, many decades, that he doesn't pervert them and turn them into engines of political persecution.
You may not say it, I'll say it. There may have been a Vice President Tim Kaine and not a Vice President Mike Pence had it not been for James Comey. I won't push you to talk more about that. But let me ask you about Pam Bondi. I mean, there was reports that she did not think there was enough evidence to move forward here. Obviously, we know that that led to Eric Siebert being pushed out. That was the consensus of the prosecutorial memo, it seems, that was given to Lindsay Halligan. Should there be consequences? Could there be consequences for Pam Bondi? I mean, she went against her own judgment.
Well, I will tell you, I think Pam Bondi did a very important psychological reveal in the statement that she put out tonight. If she felt that there was rock solid evidence to indict Jim Comey, she wouldn't have finished her official statement with the line, "We will follow the facts in this case." You know, that's what you do if you're like an investigating officer or even a prosecutor to decide whether to indict somebody. You don't indict somebody and then say, well, now we got to figure out what the facts tell us. She has shown her whole card and kind of revealed that she has deep ambivalence about what Trump is ordering her to do. She's genuflecting to the boss rather than showing the independence that Americans have come to expect from an attorney general.
I used to walk to the other side of the hallway when the attorney general came into the White House. That was my experience.
That was no indication of your guilty conscience, I'm sure. But
I was just independence. You know, one of the concerns that has been expressed, and you may have expressed this when we spoke too, is just there are excellent prosecutors and attorneys who work in the Eastern District of Virginia. They do incredibly important work. It's one of the most important offices of its kind in the country. But the person who's now leading their office just went against their recommendations. Do you have concern that people may, when we already saw that one prosecutor, Comey's son-in-law, resigned, do you have concerns that some of these talented, qualified prosecutors who are doing important work there may walk out the door?
I'm deeply worried about it, Jen.
The case that should be called Donald Trump versus James Comey has been randomly assigned to federal judge Michael Nachmanoff, who was appointed by President Biden. The judge in the case, Judge Nachmanoff, has scheduled an arraignment for Thursday, October 9th at 10 a.m. in the Alexandria, Virginia courtroom, and when James Comey will first appear in court in that case. Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Daniel Goldman of New York. He's a member of the House Judiciary Committee with jurisdiction over the Trump Justice Department, and he's a former federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York. Congressman Goldman, what questions would you have for the Attorney General in her next appearance before your committee?
Well, I would like to know the conversations that she had with Donald Trump. We know about the direct message where he told her that she needs to charge James Comey with making false statements. We then saw the U.S. attorney under her refused to charge the case because it did not meet the standards of professional responsibility and the rules of professional practice in the Department of Justice. Then Donald Trump hired yet another personal attorney of his, a former personal attorney. So you've got Pam Bondi, a former personal attorney, Todd Blanche, former personal attorney, Emil Bove, former personal attorney, and now Alina Habba in New Jersey, and now Lindsay Halligan, who's an insurance lawyer, has no idea how to prosecute a case, solely to prosecute this. So what I want Pam Bondi to explain, and I don't want to hear about the facts in the law, because the facts of this case are dead-ass losers. I want to understand what she said to Lindsay Halligan before she took over, and I want to understand how you can make any kind of colorable argument that this is not a political persecution and a revengeful, vindictive, malicious prosecution against someone who's a political enemy of Donald Trump that he directed the Department of Justice to charge. It is unconscionable that we would have a president of the United States direct his attorney general to criminally charge a political adversary of his when the evidence is so clearly not there, to the point where even a grand jury, which notoriously indicts ham sandwiches, refused to indict one of the false statement accounts, and at least two of the grand jurors said no to this one that was charged.
So in your time as a federal prosecutor, if you had been publicly ordered by the President of the United States to bring a prosecution, and you did, what would you expect to hear from the judge when you showed up in court?
Boy, I can't even imagine. It just is. It's not something that I would have ever imagined or considered. We didn't get what are called no true bills. We didn't get a grand jury rejecting an indictment. I mean, that just is unheard of. That never happens. We didn't have a scenario where none of the career prosecutors would bring this case to the grand jury, where the actual experienced U.S. attorney refused to do it. And so Lindsey Halligan, the partisan hack who Donald Trump just hired for this sole purpose, had to actually go into the grand jury room to present the evidence. I would love to see that transcript. So the judge is going to have no patience for any of this. And I think James Comey's right. It's a really, really sad day for the Department of Justice.
It is a really dark, sad, scary day for America. And that post that you just showed is truly petrifying. The President of the United States ordered criminal charges against an individual who happens to be a political adversary and a critic of him. And let's be clear about what's happening here. The president is singling out someone he just doesn't like. And that post that you just showed could create a defense, maybe even grounds for dismissal. I spent most of my life in law enforcement. I was the U.S. attorney in Connecticut for 4.5 years. We were very careful about what we said on charges because they could be used against us in a criminal trial. And this case is replete with Donald Trump telling the attorney general to act fast, and creating possible defenses here. But let's look at the broader picture. I always felt as a prosecutor, the most consequential decisions I made were whether to charge someone. People simply don't fully recover from criminal charges, even if they are acquitted, because half the world believes that they were acquitted on some kind of technicality.
Those senators, again, decades of experience between them in public life and in professional life. Many senators have legal education, for example. They're equal parts horrified by what they're seeing, but also, gobsmacked by the stupidity of it all. Because let's be clear, let's be really clear. Donald and his team admitted that this is a witch hunt, right? This isn't a broad philosophical claim of witch hunting, which is like, oh, Trump was going to run again for president and there were charges brought against him. And some of the people that brought charges against him were democratically, aligned people. They were aligned with the Democratic Party to varying degrees, and ergo, it's a witch hunt. No, this is specifically someone was fired because they wouldn't do your bidding, and then the new person starts doing your bidding. At least that's what it looks like. That looks and sounds and smells a lot more like a witch hunt. The equivalent would have been that if Biden would have fired Merrick Garland, or that if officials would have been fired by Democratic governors, if Biden would have removed a prosecutor because they wouldn't charge Trump, or they wouldn't charge another Republican, or they wouldn't charge somebody that Biden wanted revenge on for any reason. And then instantly upon replacing that person, they got their charges. If anything, the criticism of Biden was that he was too soft, that he picked the wrong kind of guy to be his attorney general in Merrick Garland, who was way too soft, and he took too long to bring charges. And Biden, because he didn't want to look like he was involving himself, didn't put any pressure on Garland or didn't seek to replace him. And then it was too late. If Biden would have put Jack Smith as his attorney general, I think it would have ended up differently. Charges would have been brought sooner, and we probably would have gotten the trials on Donald Trump's federal criminal cases, right? So Donald looks like the witch hunter. This is what he promised too. He promised this. One of the few promises he's keeping. I was going to get revenge on my enemies if I get back into the White House. He's keeping that promise, but that makes his cases weaker.